Hello, welcome to Miniature Realms. My name's Stuart. Hope you've all had a lovely Christmas and you're looking forward to New Year. Now, I've been beaving away working on a Renegade Crown's Army project, and as part of that, I need a Bonegrinder Giant, and that's what this video is all about.
Miniature Realms is proudly sponsored by Counter-Attack Bases. They stock a wide range of counters, gaming aids and movement trays for multiple game systems and offer custom items to suit your club, your event or even your podcast or YouTube channel. Check out the link in the video description. So this is the official Games Workshop Bonegrinder Giant, all £165 of it or something close to that anyway. I like this model. It's got a lot of old charm, but I've always wanted an excuse to build and paint one of these from Age of Sigmar. The Mega-gargant, this one's ever so slightly cheaper. It's still an extremely expensive model for what you get. Third party is definitely the way to go with one of these. And the kit now has been updated and you can build multiple different kits from the same thing, even though it says King Brod on there. You can build all the sets in one now. Obviously, I need a big base. That's a 100 by 150. It's time really to crack on. Now, the Kraken Eater, or something like that, I believe, is the version I'm mostly going for. But because you've got all the different build options in this kit, I can pinch stuff from other things if I want to. And I think I end up using slightly different feet on the one I built. I prefer the bare feet rather than the one with leather plimsolls on or whatever they are. And I want to change it slightly to make it a little bit more fitting for Warhammer, the old world. For such a big, expensive kit and the amount of frames you get in the box, it actually builds up really quite quickly. The core of the body is the same for all the different kits, and yeah, done in a couple of hours from start to finish. I've left the little net he's holding unglued at the moment because there's no way you'll be able to paint the things inside his net, the shells, the fish, the bodies, and the reason I want to go for sort of a Kraken themed, fish themed one is because he's going to be in my Renegade Crown's army, which has strong links to Marienburg and strong links to Manan's Blade. So I like the idea of these sometimes they're in a naval capacity. I recently purchased this flexible triad from Army Painter. I've had some paint sent by them. I quite liked one of the skin colours and I've gone for this full flexible triad, and I thought it'd be fun to use this through the airbrush to really get all the skin tones down first, and that's going to be my first goal with this miniature all through the airbrush. Now, the paints I use I'm mostly going to be holding up in front of the screen, and if I don't, I will try to give them a shout out as well. If you want a full paint list, they will be on my Patreon as a separate article shortly after the main video goes out, and that's for free members can view that as well. If you don't want to sign up for the Patreon even as a free member in order to get that, you can just pause this video throughout and you should be able to get all of the paints that I've used. Some I'll call out, some I'll forget to while I'm rabbiting away a bit like this. So no zenithal underpainting at this stage for me on this miniature. I really want to focus on that skin. I want it to be one of the most eye-catching parts of the miniature. There's so much of it on show. It's probably 65% of the miniature, and I think that's really important to get it looking good. So I'm using my airbrush because I'm going to get much smoother transitions doing it that way, and it will be an awful lot quicker as well. I'm applying very thin layers here, so I'm using all of those Army Painters standard paints, but thinned using their own airbrush thinner, which has some flow improver in. And it's that consistency of milk. I hate using that example, but in this instance, that is the consistency it is. How much you thin your paints should be to do with your own airbrush setup, your compressor, the PSI you paint at, the individual paints, and the job you have in hand. So there's no set thing, but to give you an example right now, it is that kind of consistency. And I'm working still fairly top down because I want to use the black in the primed miniature was based in. I want to use that dark colour to aid the shadows, and I'm building up in soft layers now, and each time I'm decreasing the amount that I highlight, so you're getting a full transition right from that darkest, warmest flesh colour all the way up to the lightest tone when we get to the top. Surprising how much control you can have with the airbrush doing things like this. You'll always have a bit of overspray, but you can focus on certain areas of a miniature, especially when they're a large miniature like this, very easy. And you can see here I'm adding highlights to the side of the stomach there, but making sure that I'm still leaving that shadow underneath the chest area and the nipple. And I'm just, as I said, increasing that lightness towards where the light would catch. You see right on the edge of the kneecap there, and on the muscle area there, making sure that I'm leaving the darker shade where the skin is recessed a little bit more. Final stages now of that top highlight, really adding very, very little. It does bleach it out a little bit on camera, but all of those dark recesses are still pretty dark where they need to be. Though we're going to reinforce those and add some other tones in a moment. And that top highlight, I'm also just using it to do a bit of a cheeky zenithal highlight. It looks almost white when you apply it as a thin layer. So I'm dusting it over some of the netting and over some of the broken up ship that's on the base. The next stage for me is all about adding extra tonal qualities to that flesh. Remember, I really want it to stand out. So I'm using a bit of thinner as well with some speed paints. You can use contrast paints as well. I'm going to use a mixture of greens, of blues, and sort of mauvey purple colours. But just applying it in patches in the shadowed areas of the skin, you just get a real different sort of tonal quality. And I've said this before on videos, and if you're Caucasian and you're fairly pale skinned like I am, and you look at your hand in the daylight and clench a fist, and you can see the veins underneath, you can see different tones, you can see blues and reds and things in your skin, and it's really important to try and show that sometimes, especially on a larger miniature like this, when you've got an awful lot of skin on show. You really want to make sure that it's not just big flat areas of the same colour. So after adding some of that greenish colour into the face using my hairy brush, I'm back with the airbrush again now, and I'm using the reddish colour. Now this is Murder Scene. The reason I'm calling out the name is because I completely forgot to film the bit holding it up to camera. So again, this is thinned. I'm just applying it in certain patches all over the miniature. A little bit as I go, decide where it's going to go. The backs of the knees there, a little bit around sort of the chest area as if it's a little bit flushed there. And you kind of work it out for yourself where you think, well, that's going to be a little bit darker. I want that to be a slightly warmer colour. The light's not catching there quite as much. And just going around adding little bits as I go. Same deal again, and on with some blue, and I've really thinned this quite a lot. The last thing I want to do is make this really, really vibrant. I just want to add a few little colder areas just to give you that idea of translucence that I was talking about. So little patches here on the feet, just underneath the knee, again where the shadow is a little bit, not so much on the flatter areas where that top highlight is. And I'm just taking my time a little bit, less is more, because if I don't like it in a certain area, I don't want to go too heavy all over. At this stage, I wanted to seal the skin with some varnish, so I've turned to some ultra matte varnish from AK, and after applying this, it was a little bit too matte for skin. Skin almost has a satin quality to it at times, and I didn't quite like the effect, so I decided to add a little bit of a semi-gloss Galeri airbrush varnish as well, and that just sort of turned it to the sort of satin finish I was after. I wanted to protect it. I'm going to be adding some oil washes afterwards, and my recent experience with Army Painter paints is until they're fully set, it might take 24 hours or so. They can rub off a little bit easier than some other brands, so I wanted to protect it. I'm using a bone colour here. Any bone colour will do, and I'm just dry brushing now all over the rest of the miniature that's not the skin. So I'm taking my time a little bit, working with the detail and trying not to get any paint on that flesh that I've just worked on. I have added that varnish now, so if I do accidentally spill it, but I can wipe it off quickly straight away before it dries. But the idea here, and I'm not actually doing it this fast, so split the video up. The idea here is to replicate now a bit of a zenithal, a bit of an underpaint for multiple layers of glazes. And because I've worked up to a higher highlight using those skin tones, it kind of already gives me a little bit of an airbrush zenithal anyway, and this just really picks out all the edges and all the detail, all the little folds in the clothing, all of the little stitching, and really, really makes it pop and really, really makes it stand out. Hopefully you can see there on camera that the skin's still intact, not damaged at all, and the rest of the miniature has got this zenithal-esque underpainted dry brush, slap chop, whatever you want to call it, all over. And now it's time to start adding some colours in. A bit of a mixture of colour patterns on the stitched together clothing on the Giant. As I've already mentioned, the Marienburg links to this Bonegrinder Giant to do with the made up lore I've got from my Renegade crowns list. So I want to make sure there's a good blue, a good yellow and a good red on here in patches, and then also some more plain earthy colours, browns, to sort of signify where there's leather or something like that. So he's got a mixture of fabrics that has made up his clothes. What I'm trying very hard to do here is work with that detail, work with the painting I've already done. So we've already got a nice Zenithal-esque style covering on all of the areas. So I'm applying really neat thin layers of these contrast paints, so it's a nice medium-sized glaze going over the top, so you get a nice even non-streaky, non-pooling finish, and because of that you've got highlight showing through already. I will do a further highlight, but the neater I can make this and the more I can be sympathetic to the work I've already done, and that's why I did all that dry brushing, the less I'll have to do later on. If you slap it on too thick, you'll cover too much of the highlighting that's there. If you're too thin, you won't go into the recesses enough. So it's about getting used to how these paints work, how they behave, and really controlling it for that nice smooth finish, and you'll get something that looks fantastic without actually having to highlight at all. And that takes a little bit of practice over time, rather than just slapping your contrast paints over a plain white colour or something. That works, that does a job, but if you really do this a lot, and you do a lot of underpainting, a lot of dry brushing, and you do good quality dry brushing, you can then do good quality glazes over the top like this as a base layer, and it's amazing how great it can look without actually doing any more. With those reds, yellows and blues down, I'm moving on to a mixture of browns here. And I'm using a lot of army paint you'll see in the video. The full list will go up, as I've already said. It's not because I think they're particularly better than the alternative browns out there. I really do like them, but I'm just testing them at the moment. I'm playing out around with the full range really, so that when I make a future video, not too long now, a couple of weeks away, I can give a really good sort of review of them and a retrospective on how they are now that they've been out for a little while compared to contrast, that kind of thing. So that look out for that in the future. And I know I've mentioned that in a couple of previous videos, but I just wanted to explain why. If you've watched a lot of my videos, you'll see me using Citadel contrast, Citadel contrast, Citadel contrast, and suddenly everything looks to be army painter, and that's the reason being is I wanted to see whether I could still do the same kind of work I do, mostly using other ranges. So you'll notice I've been picking out different panels as sort of leathery colours. I have some leather strapping as well using the browns, and this is Bony Matter, their own kind of skeleton horde. It's different to skeleton horde. I like them both, they do different things. If I could only have one, I'd probably have skeleton horde, but this is very good for a very subtle, more of a brown looking, very thin glaze over the top of some of these areas. And you can see I'm just very subtly tinting here some of the colour that's just basically flesh, and then dry brush over the top. Army Painter do have some amazing greens in their speed paint range, and I'm using a couple here to wet blend onto this scaly pattern here. So whether it's some kind of crocodile or something else, I'm not sure. It can be whatever you want. But we've got a bit of a scaly skin that's strapped to his arm as a bit of extra armor. I'm wet blending them, much like I do with the wet blending I do on wood. Again, if you follow the channel a lot, you'll have seen me doing that, and you'll see me doing that a little bit later in this video. I'm wet blending those two colors together on that underpainted dry brushed miniature, so all that detail shows through, and you're getting really smooth blends and changes in tone and color, just by making sure that you mix them together while they're still wet on the miniature. I've still got a bit of the yellow on my palette as well, so I'm just adding that in at the same time, and hopefully you can really see the benefits of doing that underpainting and working with these colours quite deliberately and not just splashing it on too thick, painting it on almost, but when blending them together at the same time, and you get this really lovely finish that would take ages if I was layering this up with traditional acrylic paints and highlighting each scale. You get something that looks pretty impressive for next to none of the time. Different greens, but exactly the same process now on another little chunk. Maybe it's supposed to be the same animal, but I'm pretending it's not, and it's a big chunk of another bit of crocodile or something or other strapped to his bell, maybe a part snack. You can see the sort of internals hanging out of both ends of it, which would be fun to paint a little bit later on. I hinted at that wood painting method a few seconds ago, and it's been in a lot of videos. There's no set colours for it, but I usually have 2 or 3 browns and a green. In this instant, I've just got a brown and a green and some medium as well. I nearly always thin it when I paint the wood like this. Only works when you have an underpainted area, at the very, very least grayscale. With lots of dry brushing, with all of the wood grain showing up on that dry brushing. That's quite important to it. And then I just dab on the brown and then dab on the green and mix them together, wet blending again on the miniature, and you just get a really nice effect of multi-tonal wood. And there are better videos in my back history to see how that happens on a larger area, but it's a really, really good and quick way of painting wood. And there's a few other bits of wood on the miniature as well. We've got those bits of broken ship or boat. Now on the original build for the miniature, that was actually on his back, over one shoulder with a fish dangling from it. It looks amazing, but it looks a bit too AOS for me, so I just decided to just use it as base dressing. And then after that, he's got his big club as well, where half of that is looks like a big wooden tree trunk or something like that. So I'm just using the same method and painting it all at the same time while it's on my palette. This is for an army. I want it to be a really impressive, eye-catching piece, but it's not being painted for a painting competition or anything like that. It's very much centerpiece of an army. I'm treating it as an army piece, and most of the work I do on the channel is very much sort of eye-catching but still army painting. I haven't covered painting this little bag of bodies and fish very much. There's loads of little things in there, but it's basically humans. They've gone through all of the layers of airbrushing that the Giant did himself. I've just thinned down one of the flesh colours in the Army Painter range, and I'm giving it an all-over wash, really. Most of it gets hidden because when you glue it into the miniature, it's covered by netting. But I just want to give it a little bit more tone, and there'll be lots of other effects and things that go on later. One of the effects is just to use some thinned purple contrast paint here, and thin it enough and just paint it over the entrails that are hanging out of quite a few of the bodies, and also the other ends of that sort of bit of crocodile, whatever it is, on the Giant as well. And it just adds a little bit of colour, a little bit of interest onto these sort of half dismembered bodies that are in this netting. This is a Mega Blue. It's a metallic blue paint there. You can use a silver metallic if you want to, and then put a blue wash over it. But if you're painting fish and you want a fish that looks like he's got a silvery blue scales, using metallic paints is a really interesting way of doing it. I've been doing it a lot recently. Then sticking with the metallics, this is bits of tin, which is a brownish metallic colour, and I just love painting a brown metallic on before I cover steel areas. I've covered it a lot in videos. In my last video, which you'll have just seen maybe, Iron Warriors, again, even with those, I started with a brown metallic. I just love the tonal quality it gives you when you add steel colours over the top of it, just leaving some of that brown metallic in the recesses. Now we're moving on to some skeleton hordes. Well, there are some citadel paints in this paint job, and I'm starting to paint in all of the skulls and things that are dotted around the miniature. We're starting to fill in the areas that haven't been touched by something else. We've got a big jawbone of something big, maybe a shark or something like that, dangling from his back as well. That was from another part of the miniature, something else that I stuck in a different place. I think it was supposed to be around his neck. Just looked a little bit too much. For this, looks a bit more Warhammer, that he's got it round his waist for something. Maybe he's keeping it to make into a weapon later, rather than wearing it as some kind of weird armour. Got what looks like a octopus leg, and it probably wouldn't be bright pink. It's going to be a blue or a black or something like that, but I wanted something else to really pop and stand out on the miniature, just to be another little interest that won't completely draw your eye away, but occasionally might make you go and look. So I decided to make, it's a fantasy world afterwards, so I decided to make this octopus slight pink, and I'm just giving this a thin coat all over. And then we're back to some more skeleton horde as I start to pick out all of the netting that's all over the miniature. And I wasn't sure I was going to make this a sort of darker black colour netting, but I really wanted to make use of all of that underpainting that I did, and this was one of the better ways of doing it. I think it was the right colour choice in the end. Now it's back to the bone colour again and some more dry brushing, and something I like doing when I'm working with contrast style paints is to do the dry brush and reglaze method. and I'm going back over everything that I've just added the bone colour to, and some of the clothing panels where it's a brown or something like that. I'm not touching the reds or the yellows or the blues. I'm just catching the wood again in little touches in little areas, and all of the rope areas and some of the leather areas. The idea is just to catch a little bit on those edges, give them a little bit of an edge highlight with the dry brushing. So hardly any paint on this at all. Same on the bone areas again. And then the next thing will be to go back with that skeleton horde again and then reglaze. And what you're doing is just really focusing on those highlights and building up by layers. It means you get the more subtle transitions between them, and it looks more like you spend a lot of time going there with your regular brush, hairy brush, and painting in all the detail bit by bit and highlighting it. But instead you're saving a lot of time by going back and doing more and more dry brushing. You've got to be neat with your dry brushing to do it. There's no point in doing it if you're going to get your dry brushing all over the skin you finished, or the red areas or the blue areas and things. But if you're subtle enough with it, it's amazing how much time you can save overall, and it still looks really great. Now it's time to highlight the red, the blue and the yellow panels. The reason I'm leaving them to after I've done all of those sort of more sort of earthy colours, all of that dry brushing, is if I do accidentally catch the edge of one of those panels, I'm not going to have to go and fix it afterwards, because I'm going to go along now and do the highlighting of those. So it's just a matter of finding a red, a yellow and a blue that are the right match for the highlight colour on those areas. And there is a highlight colour already on there, because that underpainting means that those edges or the detail shows up as a lighter colour from those really neat glazes that I've done earlier on. I really want something that kind of enhances those edges rather than looks like a different colour, because I don't want to go back and do full layering highlighting on these. I could do, but I want to do as little as possible, because I think it looks pretty good as it is. There's already variation in tone and colour because of the way I've painted so far. So I'm really picking out the bottom edges, or just the bottom quarter or 20% or something like that. Thinned paint, blending it in and just making it pop and stand out a little bit more, so it's subtle, so you're almost matching that top colour that you've already got there. It's not always possible to find the exact colour to do that, and occasionally I will have a really nice effect and I'll go, right, what's my highlight going to be for this contrast paint, and there isn't one. But it's very, very rare, especially with reds and yellows. They're super easy. It was very easy to find the right red to do that. I looked at an Army Painter one, it was a little bit too bold. I wanted something a little bit more desaturated, so they found that the two thin coats paint was perfect. Same deal really with the two thin coats on the yellow. The blue was a little bit harder to find the right mix, but again, just because I'm doing very subtle just edge highlights on it, it was absolutely fine. And then what I'm not going to show you loads and loads of detail, I went around the whole miniature with a little bit of that sort of bone colour and picked out every single stitch between all of the fabric. Now that darker brown metallic is fully dry, I can go back and start working on the next layers of those. This is a gunmetal type colour, black metal, from the Scale and Alchemy range. Really love it. Really good paint. Can't always get hold of it. But any gunmetal colour works as a nice next layer over that brown metallic that I've used. There's not loads of metals on this miniature. You've got little hooks and things holding the heads and skulls on. And there's a little bit on the wooden bit on his right arm. I guess it was a door he's made that out of. And there's some little things sticking out of the netting as well. Looks like a tiny trident, which I suppose makes sense with the nautical side. Most of the metal is on the cannon barrels that he has strapped in as part of his big club there. There's strapping holding it all together, and I don't know if that was supposed to be leather riveted on. Probably. I quite liked the idea of having it as this thinner metal that he's beaten and bashed around and then riveted on afterwards. That's just a decision I made with it. It might look better as leather. I just didn't imagine it holding together right. But you'll see now I'm onto the very top highlight, the brightest colour. I'm using Mithril from Army Painter, and it's little dots here and there to really make it pop, especially on the earrings and the nose ring, and then a little bit of dry brushing where there's a lot of metallic together towards the end of that big club there. So this is Shyish Purple and Vulpus Pink, and I use them all the time on skin recipes, and I wanted to return here to something I was really comfortable with for an area that was quite important to the finish of the miniature. I've done a lot of work with the airbrush, and I really wanted to add some extra depth and tone and realism to the face, and the best way to do that was recess shading here, and I'm going in with the purple and the pink colour, essentially turning them into glazes. They're thinned and on my wet palette,
I'm just painting them into the recesses and then blending them out using the purple colour in the shadowed areas more and around the eyes and around the ears. And then I'll move on to the pinker colour as well, focus that more around the nose and the lower part of the face, and just really bring it to life, giving it some extra tonal quality that you could do with the airbrush on the larger areas, but I decided to leave the hairy brush for the face, because the face is where all that character is. A bit of a mix in basing textures here. This is some Vallejo stuff first, and then I move on to some AK things. They actually match two different armies. The Empire army I started a while ago is using the Vallejo stuff, and a lot of my recent stuff is using the AK stuff. And I wanted to blend them together because I want these Renegade Crowns armies to potentially work as a bit of a mix and match with a few armies, using the same oil washes that I use on a lot of my armies, grease being my favourite. I'm using this as a bit of coverall on all the metal areas, but I add this as a shade in quite a few areas. Using an old brush with an oil paint, I'm using it a little bit like you might use an Agrak earth shade here, painting it in most cases. The joy is you can remove it afterwards. It takes a long time to set. You just need to be a little bit careful over some paint jobs because it can remove paint if you're too thick with it. That's partly why I went and varnished on these army painter paints, because I know they're a little bit softer till they're fully set. But I'm just painting it in certain areas all over all the metallics, of which I'll wipe some off in a moment, but also little things like picking out the toenails, or at least around the top end of the toenails, and shading there, and then I slap it all over the base as well and on the wood on there. It does a great job of shading and weathering at the same time, and it doesn't pull the same way as a standard wash does, and that's why I love using oil paints, and when they dry they just look fantastic. When oil paints are surface dry, you can start to play around them a little bit, and I'm just removing the bigger pooled areas, or where it's over the flatter areas on the metallics, just so I leave it just in the recesses. This is the only area I take it off on this miniature, and you can use a little bit of white spirit or artist white spirit if you want to help with that. You don't want to use regular white spirit, it needs to be artist type. This is AK thinner, but I didn't really need to there because it was wet enough, and I'm just putting it away and just leaving it in the recesses on that metal, and it looks fantastic. Getting quite near the end now, well, I've got a blood effect, a sort of horrible other effect, and some shyish purple, and I've got them on my wet palette. The blood effect, the army painter one, it just almost feels like exactly the same stuff as Blood for the Blood God from Citadel. They are much for muchness, both great. I love them. I've had a little bit of that purple contrast paint there, just to darken it down here and giving it a glaze over that whole pink leg. Not enough to change the overall colour of it too much, but just to make it look a bit icky and glistening all over. It's amazing how you can sort of glaze and paint with these effects. Also adding it there just to the edge of this sort of hunk of crocodile or saurus or whatever it happens to be on the back of his belt there, where you've got the wet ends, shall we call them. Maybe they're probably be a little bit more dried out, but again, that's another reason why I've added some of that darker colour to the blood, so it doesn't look quite so fresh, adding little bits of that green goo and things as well. Some of the heads aren't just skulls, there's still flesh on them, so adding, rather than a sort of fresh blood, adding that darker colour and a bit of the green on there, again, it just makes them look proper gross, as you can imagine. And then his bag of bits of snacks or whatever they are, again, the bodies have probably been there for a long time, so not too much fresh blood, but a bit of a mix, some little marks where the limbs have been cut off, just making sure it looks a bit sickly and horrible at the end. It's loads of fun to do this. Just try not to get too carried away, because you can take away the realism actually by trying to make it look too realistic. I've had a little bit of blood running down the side of his mouth there. Think Denethor eating cherry tomatoes in Return of the King. But again, just another little bit of extra effect, a little bit of extra detail to the face to really add character and grossness in there. Same for wounds. He's got a nail on the top of his head, so I've got that running with a little bit of blood. And then he's also got an arrow in his arm, which I added in there, and again I thought that looked pretty cool, so I've super glued that in after drilling a hole, added a little bit of blood, looks great. And then he's got lots of little cuts and things that are actually sculpting into the miniature, so I'm just filling them with a little bit of blood effect, and in some cases just doing a very faint run of blood afterwards, so it's like he's being nicked in battle. Maybe it's a sword blow, maybe it's an arrow that's shot past him, or stone being thrown at him. Again, slightly thinned blood effect here just on the elbow a little bit, and again it just looks like he's fallen or something, or grazed his arm. Just adds loads of detail, makes it look grim and gruesome and realistic.
couple of dry pigments here, again to go with the two different basing schemes that I've got a bit of a mix of going on here, and I think it kind of works. It's almost, you get an area of mud when you're near the coast. I grew up by the coast, but you'll get sort of beaches and things where you've got soil, and then they blend out into dunes, and the soil slowly gets sandier and sandier, and I wanted to have that effect, and that works quite nicely with the two different basing textures and the two different pigments I use. I just brushed into the texture though and blown off excess. I'm not worried about sealing it in, and then lots of tufts that match both armies. Luckily they're the same, placed all over the base to finish it off. A little bit of mud effect as well. This is European mud, so rather than a basing texture, this is more of a mud effect. I'm just putting this on in clumps over the tufts. Again, just makes them look like it's a bit more realistic, like mud being churned up between the grass. You can get a little bit on the bottom of his feet there as well. He's going to get dirty feet while he's walking through this, and then finish it off with a nice black rim to your base. And there he is, all finished, one big beast. I had loads of fun with this, and I hope, and in fact I'm pretty confident, that he fits the Warhammer Fantasy / Old World aesthetic and doesn't look like a AOS miniature stranded in the old world. It's definitely a new style of miniature. I'm not trying to claim he's a match to a classic like the Bonegrinder Giant, which I also have painted if you look on the channel a fair while back, but I'm pretty happy with him to do the job as a Bonegrinder Giant in my Renegade Crowns army, and there's going to be lots more coming to do with that army in the next few weeks or just after Christmas. So do look out for that if you're interested to see what I'm working on for it towards doubles, and then on to a 2,000 point list. So 1,000 point first and then a 2,000 point afterwards. But I'm really happy the way he's come out. I think it's very eye-catching, centre of the table kind of miniature. And I hope if you watch it all the way through, you'll be able to see that you can achieve that without being a sort of a golden demon winning standard painted with your hairy brush. There's lots of effects and things that you can do using tools and equipment that you can have a really striking looking centerpiece miniature that you actually haven't spent hardly any time doing brush highlighting and things on. And that's something I try to work on with an awful lot of my videos, how to produce nice eye-catching looking miniatures and armies, but also keeping it to a reasonable standard. And I think aside from learning how to airbrush, if you're not already an airbrush user, all the other stuff in there that you can learn just through standard practicing and things in there, a lot of it is kit that you can buy, like or effects you can buy. So good quality tufts and basing textures, and using oil washes, using blood effects to good effect rather than just slopping it on the end of a weapon, and little tips and tricks like that I think, I hope, show that you can have a really cool sort of centerpiece miniature like that without, as I say, being an award-winning painter, because I'm certainly not that. But he was just loads of fun. I love him. I'm looking forward to having him in the centre of my army. Let me know what you think in the comments. Did it come out all right? Anything that you would do differently? Always interested to learn from other people as well.
Well, thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed my ramblings around how I painted the Bonegrinder Giant and why I used the miniature I have. I'm really looking forward to producing more content on this army. Actually, there's going to be more painting videos planned for it. Hopefully I'll get those to you, and there will be a video a little bit about the direction I'm going in and the list choices I've made. It's very narrative based, as you can imagine, with a Renegade Crowns list, so that will be fun to bring to you as well. So if you like that kind of stuff, make sure you're subscribed to the channel so you don't miss it. Drop a comment in this video as well if you've enjoyed it. It really helps the video get seen by other people, and of course give the video a like as well. If you like what I do on the channel and you'd like to support me, please check out my Patreon. It's the very best way of supporting me. Multiple tiers on there give you lots of different benefits, and there's a really fun Discord to join as well, and there's a big free section on that Discord, so you don't have to be a Patreon member to be in there. But again, I really appreciate the support for those of you who are able to do so. Check out all the other links in the video description. There's other affiliate links and things, and also check out the channel sponsor, Counter Attack Bases. But thank you very much for watching. Take care, and I'll catch you soon.